Hello everyone, this is Charlie from the Bloomingdale Public Library and welcome to Introduction to Calc, a spreadsheet application in the free LibreOffice suite. So if you're looking for an alternative to Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel, LibreOffice Calc might be for you. So first off, what exactly is LibreOffice? LibreOffice is a free open source office suite comparable with the Microsoft Office suite. So if you're looking for a word processor or a slideshow application, you'll find those in there too. LibreOffice is a spin-off of OpenOffice, which still exists but does not see much active development. So if you remember a while ago, there used to be a debate about which free office suite was better. Well, that's pretty much been decided by time. LibreOffice is the way to go. There is a story behind the rise and fall of OpenOffice, but that is for another day. So Calc specifically is a spreadsheet application included in the LibreOffice suite with a look and feature set similar to Microsoft Excel. While I was learning Calc, I was actually surprised at how many shortcuts and functions carried over. So Calc can both open and save files with an Excel file type, which is XLS. And incidentally, Excel will also open LibreOffice Calc files as well. I forget what they are. I think they're ODS type. So Calc is available for Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. In fact, it is packaged with a lot of the popular flavors of Linux. You'll also see that partner companies have apps available on the mobile platforms, but we're not going to be discussing those today. Now we're going to download and install LibreOffice on our computer. I'm working on Windows 10, so obviously if you're on Windows 11 or using a Mac or a Linux machine, things are going to be a little bit different. On a Windows computer with an internet connection, go ahead and open up the browser of your choice. And the web page we're going to is LibreOffice.org. That'll take you here. You can either go to the download menu at the top here and choose the first option, download LibreOffice, or you can click on the big download now button that appears on all of the slides. Now I'll take you to this page here. We're only worried about the left side. And as we scroll down a bit, you see there are two versions. The top version will be the latest version. It'll have some new features, but it's considered still in testing. So you might run into a bug here and there. The bottom version is a little older, but considered tested and stable. So unless you know there's a new feature that you want to use or just try out, I'd recommend choosing the bottom one. Choose your operating system from the menu here, and then click download. So once you do that, you should see it start to download, either at the top or in the bottom corner or wherever, depending on your browser. And then you'll be on this page here. This page has an additional download for the help. So when you're using LibreOffice, you can go into the menu and go to the help option, and it'll bring up all the documentation. So if you don't download the help, then you're going to get a message that says you need to download it or to go to the website to see the documentation. So it's up to you if you want to do the extra download for 2.3 megabytes. It's pretty small, so I'd recommend downloading that as well. For time, I'm going to skip that. If you scroll down a bit, you can see you can make a donation if you like. So now that we've got it downloaded, we can go into the download folder and click to run. So I'm not going to go through the whole process since I've already got it installed, but you'd hit next, choose a typical install, and everything should run normally. So the reason you would choose a custom install is if you wanted to put it like onto a different hard drive or choose a different folder. Again, not usually necessary. Also keep in mind, if you already have other word processors or spreadsheet applications on your computer, installing LibreOffice is probably going to change the default file types. So if you wanted to change those back, you'd go into the settings, go to apps, go to default apps, and then choose default apps by file type. So here's where you'll see all the different file types and what program opens them. And again, since I've already got Microsoft Excel on here, that XLSX, that is the typical file extension of an Excel sheet, is now going to open to LibreOffice by default. So it's taking a bit to open, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. But again, if you wanted to reset things back to something other than LibreOffice in Windows, that's where you would go. So now that you have LibreOffice installed, which will probably request a restart, that's fine. You should have a shortcut on your desktop that says LibreOffice from whatever version, and it's white with a gray border. If you uncheck the box to leave a shortcut on your desktop, you have to go into the list of applications through the Start menu, go down to L for LibreOffice, and when you click on the folder, you'll see all the other applications installed with LibreOffice. Notice halfway down we have LibreOffice Calc. Just go ahead and click and drag on that and drop it on the desktop to leave yourself a shortcut to LibreOffice Calc. If you do open just the straight up LibreOffice application, it's kind of like a hub where you've got, again, all the applications that are installed. You can also drag and drop files into the middle and it'll open with the correct application. You also have folders to go into your recent files and things like that. Honestly, I don't usually use the LibreOffice Hub application. So with LibreOffice Calc on our desktop, I'm just going to double click on that, and that should take us here. So we're just going to do a quick overview. It should look similar, yet slightly different than what you're used to if you've used other applications. In Microsoft Excel, you'll usually have your ribbon at the top here, but then above your ribbon, you'll have tabs. And in LibreOffice, you're just going to have straight up menus. So when you click on the menus, you'll see all of the commands are in there. You can go ahead and customize your ribbon to include and exclude certain commands, but we're not going to go through that today. So again, below the menu, you have the ribbon here, and it looks kind of messy, but as you roll over things, you'll see what they are, and you'll notice that these are all things that you should be accustomed to seeing if you've used other applications. So you've got your font styling, sizing, bold, italicize, underline, as well as things like save and print and justification and alignment. Again, once you start looking at what each individual icon is, you realize that you're familiar with most of these already. So in the middle, you see our spreadsheet. Again, that shouldn't look too unfamiliar. Above the spreadsheet, we have our formula box, which we'll look at very briefly. This is just an introduction, and we're just getting our feet wet, so that's kind of an advanced topic. On the far right, we have a shortcut to some more of the commands. As you click on things, it'll pop up a side window there. Not going to use that anymore today. At the far bottom, we have our status bar. It'll tell you how many sheets you've got, as well as our zoom slider on the far right here, where we can zoom in and also tell you what language we're proofreading in. So with all that said, let's go ahead and look at adding some content to our spreadsheet. All you got to do is click on a box and start typing. And I'm going to make things easy to see by just using one letter in each box. So if I hold down A, I've already got the caps lock on. You'll see it goes right through to the next cell. If I click away, it even stays there. It doesn't get hidden by the borders of the other cell. So this is in B2. If I were to click in C2 and start typing, you'll see it goes right over it now, and you no longer see the continuation. When I click away, we'll get a little arrow to indicate that there's overflow. So I'm going to jump over to E2 here. Again, I'm going to start typing here. If you hit enter, you go down to the next cell. If you want to go up, it's shift enter. So enter and shift enter is how you go up and down. If you want to go to the next cell to the right, you hit tab. To go left, you hit shift tab. And that is how you can navigate from left to right. Now that kind of gives you a problem if you wanted to add an extra line to a cell. In order to do that, you would use Control Enter. So when I do Control Enter and start typing some more, Control Enter again. You'll see I stay in E2. And if I click away now, instead of giving us overflow, it's actually going to expand the height of the cell. And that's kind of a default behavior of Calc, is you'll always get more height if you need it in a cell. I'd like to look at formatting our cells a little bit. So let's say we wanted to make column C a little bit wider. All we got to do is roll our cursor over the line between C and D, and you'll notice it turns into a double-sided arrow. Now I can click and drag to another point, and that is how we would make our column wider. Likewise, we can click and drag to make it smaller as well. Works the same for rows. If you hold your cursor over a line between two numbers, say 9 and 10, click and drag, and you can make the cell a little bit taller. Again, the cell will naturally become taller to accommodate a wider font or multiple lines of text, but this way you can actually give yourself a little bit of overflow space. So let's say you wanted to make cells taller and wider, but you wanted to affect the whole spreadsheet at once. What you can do is click on this little space here between the A and the 1, and I'm going to work with cell A1 here. I'm going to click and drag the line between A and B. And when I do that, you'll notice all the cells conform to that width. Likewise, I'm going to click and drag on the line between 1 and 2. And once again, all the cells accommodate. So now that we have bigger cells, we can have a look at alignment. So I'm going to go ahead and type in Hello World. When I click out of another cell, you'll notice its default alignment goes to the bottom left. And that actually looks kind of ugly. So if you wanted to adjust that, I'm going to go back to B1 here. And our alignment options are all right here. So the horizontal alignment starts from left to middle to right, and you'll notice Hello World moves around. And go back to the middle. Likewise with vertical, we've got top, middle, bottom. I'm going to go back and leave it to the middle, and that is how you would center your cell content. Now let's say you wanted the cell to jump out a little bit. Maybe you had a bad year. You wanted to highlight it in red. You would go to the background color here, then click on whatever color you like, and you'll notice it'll change the cell color to your selection. If you choose a color that doesn't work with your font too well, you can also adjust the font color right next to it here. Say we wanted to make it white. And there you go. Now it jumps out a little bit at you. So that's a bit more of the formatting options we have with working with cells. Next, we'll have a look at cutting, copying, and pasting. Cut, copy, and paste work pretty much the way you'd expect, with maybe a couple exceptions. That's dependent on how you select your cells. So we'll have a look at a couple of different ways you can select cells. Before I do that, I just want to show you one other thing here. With this cell selected here, I'm going to hit delete. And you'll notice when I do that, it doesn't actually clear the formatting of the cell, just the contents. In other words, if I start typing something else in there, it retains the font color, it retains the alignment, as well as the background color. So something to be aware of. So with B1 selected, let's have a look at our commands here. We've got cut with the scissors, copy with the duplicate pages, and paste with the clipboard. You'll notice that when I roll over each one, you'll see what they do, as well as the shortcut keys, which are Control-X, Control-C, and Control-V. And those are pretty common keys for lots of other programs, so I'd recommend getting comfortable with them. If you have trouble remembering them, just look down at the keyboard and you'll notice they're all right next to each other. You'll also notice with the commands at the top here that the clipboard has a little arrow next to it. And if I click on that, it shows a whole bunch of different ways you can paste something into a cell. And I'm not going to be looking at those today. So when you use the command at the top here, just click on the clipboard. Otherwise, I'd recommend getting familiar with the shortcut keys. So it still says goodbye here in our cell. I want to also show you undo and redo, just because it's a nice, easy way to fix a mistake. Those are these commands here with the curved arrows. You have undo and then redo, which is grayed out because there's nothing to redo yet. So in those, shortcuts are Control-Z and Control-Y. Control-Z is a very common undo key combination as well. To redo, Control-Y is common, but it's not as common as Control-Z. I've seen some other combinations for redo. Nonetheless, Control-Z and Control-Y are worth getting to know when working with Calc. And as I hit Control-Z a couple times, we go back to Hello World. So let's go ahead and cut that cell. Go to a different cell, click on Paste, and there should be no surprises there. Control-Z, Control-Z, puts it back. So I haven't cut or copied it again, but it's whenever you cut or copy something, what you're cutting or copying goes into a place in memory called the clipboard, and it stays there until something else overwrites it. In other words, without cutting or copying again, I can go ahead and paste into the cell without any problems, and heck, I can go to another cell and paste again. So it's a nice shortcut if you need to copy the same cell over and over again. You can go ahead and Control-C one time to copy, and then Control-V all over the place. So if you wanted to, say, move an entire row, all you got to do is click on the number here, and it will select the entire row. I'm going to go ahead and do Control-X to cut, select another row, Control-V to paste. And that's how you can move an entire row. I'm going to hit Control-Z, Control-Z to undo that and put it back. Same thing goes for a column as well. Just to make this column unique, I'm going to add some more content here. Very original. So now I'm going to go ahead and select the B column, copy it with Control-Z. We'll go to column E here, Control-V to paste it, and you see that works just the way you'd expect. So if you do copy something, and let's say go to a column where there's already something there, so Control-D already has something in the first row. When you go to paste, you're going to get a warning, and it just lets you know that you're pasting over a cell that already has content in it. And that could be extremely helpful for when you start copying and pasting with formulas if you have a blank cell, because even though a cell is blank, it might have some data attached to it. So a nice little warning there. Now the situation will probably occur where you have a spreadsheet all filled out, but you wanted to add some columns or rows somewhere in the middle where you already have data there. So let's say we want to open up a new column here where column C is, but we don't want to overwrite any of the column C data. We're going to go ahead and select column C, and what we would do is go up to where it says Sheet, and then Insert Columns, and we've got two options here. If we do columns before, you see we have a whole new column here, and everything is shifted over one. And we retain the formatting of the cells before column C. I'm going to go ahead and undo that. If I go to Sheet, Insert Columns, and do columns after, column C stays still, and we have a new column here in column D, and it retains the formatting from column C. So two different ways of shifting things over and creating a new column. Now let's say we wanted to do column G here. We wanted to stick that where column C is without overwriting column C's data. I'm going to go ahead, select column G by clicking on the letter, cut, click on column C, and go to paste, and no surprise, we're getting the message where there's something already there and we don't want to overwrite it. So no, we don't want to do that. We can go ahead and insert a new column again like we did before and paste into that, or we can do something called Paste Special, where we right click, select Paste Special, and we have all these different options for how we paste into the column here. So of particular note here is formats. This checkbox will keep all the formatting, so if I uncheck this, it's going to go to the red and white that's already there. If I keep it checked, it's going to stay yellow. shift cells, we want it to shift right. You'll notice that we only have the options for shifting right and shifting down, which is for rows. You can't shift left or up. If I do don't shift, we're just going to get that same message where there's already something there and we're going to paste over it. So we don't want don't shift, we want shift right. And we're going to keep the formatting, so we keep the yellow background. I'm going to click OK now. And sure enough, it shifts everything over and it keeps the formatting. So rows work the same way, but I'm not going to repeat the process. I'm going to trust that you understand what I did and can replicate it with rows. Now I'd like to talk about working with groups of cells just a little bit. To create a group of cells, all you got to do is click and drag, and when you release, you will have created a group of cells in a rectangular shape. Once you have your group of cells selected, you can click and drag to move them around. You can also cut and paste them. Keep in mind the rectangle that is selected when you go to paste is going to be the top leftmost cell of the pasted selection. So when I paste, you'll see this is the top left selection there. I'm going to undo that. You can also format all those cells at once. So if I wanted to give them all the same background color and font color, that would be a way to go about doing that. I'm going to undo all that. Something to be aware of, I'm going to go ahead and select A1 through A3 here. When you're moving cells around, you can accidentally wipe out cell data. So before, when we were copying and pasting, we were going to get a warning anytime we were pasting over cells that had cell data in it. When you're moving cells around, you don't get that warning. So now if I were to go and move this around, you see we lost D1 through D3. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that and get our data back. Another way we can select cells is with the Shift key. So if I select A1 here, hold down the Shift key, and select D1, once again we have a rectangular group of cells that we can move around, cut, paste, and format. If I hold down the Shift key with the selection already on the screen, we can add to the selection. Again, everything gets treated as it did before. Another way of selecting cells is with the Control key. So I'm going to select A1, hold down Control, and select A3. And you see as I do that, I don't get A2. I get individual cells without the cells in between. So kind of funny thing, if I were to go ahead and copy those cells, go down to B4 and paste them, we get something you might not have expected. So we get our selection of cells pasted, but we don't get the cells in between because they're not selected. The same thing happens if we work in a row here. I'm going to go ahead and select A1 and D1, copy them, and then go to F2 here, paste them. You see we lose all the cells in between. There's reasons why you'd want that to happen, but otherwise that might be unexpected. Now let's say you wanted to make a selection where you're skipping rows and columns in the same selection. I'm going to select A1, A3, and D1 and try to copy them. You'll see when I do, I get an error message. So you're not allowed to do that. You can only have a gap in your rows or your columns, not at the same time. So all this stuff that we're doing, you can do that with columns and rows as well. So if you select column B, hold down Shift, select column A. Now we have a group of columns selected, and if I click and drag them over D, you see we wipe out entire columns all at once. So be careful if you're going to be moving around entire groups of columns, especially if you have an extremely large spreadsheet that goes off the page, because you have no idea what you could be pasting over. At the same time, if you wanted to create banding to make your spreadsheets easier to read, that's a nice way to go about it. I'm going to hold down the Control key and select every other row. Give them a light background. And that's one way you can polish up your spreadsheet a little bit. There's plenty more topics I'd like to cover, but I'm going to finish off with 2 quickies and a brief discussion on formulas. So, the first little trick I'd like to show you is merging cells. This is particularly useful if you're putting a header or title on a table in your spreadsheet. So what I'm going to do here is select B1 through E1, and then up here I'm going to use this guy here. It says merge and center. So when I click on that, all 4 of these cells basically act as one now with a centered formatting. Oops. Formula. And there we go. So again, a nice way to just put a title on a table. And if you decide you want to undo it, we've got the unmerged cells right here. That breaks everything up. I'm going to undo that and go back to my center title. So next, I want to show creating borders, and that's pretty easy. I'm going to be using these 3 commands right here. So it's borders, border style, and border color. So with the cell selected, you can go ahead and click on the borders command, and you have this whole list of options to choose from. I'm going to choose the bottom border only. Choose the bottom option here, and maybe something red that stands out. And there you go. And that's how you create a border on a cell or a group of cells. I'll go ahead and do it for each of these rows here, just to let it sink in. So these are particularly useful if you're creating a printout and you don't intend on showing the grid lines. The border lines will still show. There we go. Oops. Let's try that again. There we go. Because I'm going to be totaling these lines up, I'm going to go ahead and create another border here on the right side. So again, you choose your border, choose your style, choose your color. That's all there is to it. So that's borders. Now let's go ahead and talk about formulas. So what are formulas? Formulas are basically a way to generate cell content by performing functions on other cell content. So again, I'm not going to get into too much depth with this topic, but I do want to demonstrate it because formulas are a big part of why people use spreadsheets. So we'll start off with this first row here, and all I'm going to do is add them all up. So there's a bunch of ways to go about doing this, but what we want to do is select the cell and then come up here to the formula bar. We're going to start off with an equal sign, and I'm just going to add each cell one at a time. So it's B2 plus C2 plus D2 plus E2. I hit enter, and 106 sounds about right. Let's go ahead and format these cells so they look nice and pretty. There we go. Okay, so that is one way to go about it, and it's not a way most people do it. But let's carry on and go through another way of using a formula. And that's with the formula wizard. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this little FX here that says function wizard. And in here, I'm going to look for the sum function. So you can see there's quite a few functions here for you to use. And they're all in alphabetical order. So here it is. I click on sum, click on next, and now it gives us a spot to fill in all the numbers that we can add up. So I'm going to click on this little box here. And select B2. Click on that. And we can just type in the rest here. So C2, D2. Capitalization does not matter. E2. And OK. And you can see each cell is divided by commas. And that's fine. And oops, I meant to do this row, not the row above it. So those are going to be 3s. That looks better. So you can either add up the cells individually, you can use the function wizard. Next, I'm going to go ahead and use this little guy on the side here, the function sidebar. And sum happens to be among the last used. Otherwise, you can click on the drop-down menu and you can see everything is divided by various categories. I'm going to go ahead and just use the sum out here in the last used. Click enter. And when I do that, it pops up here with equals sum and number. Now instead of dividing everything up with commas, I'm going to use the range option. So I'm going to do B4 and then a colon, and we're going to go to E4. So E4, enter. And using a colon is a way to include a range of cells. And that can span across rows and columns as well. So I'm going to close that up. And this time I'm just going to go ahead and type the function since I know what it is. So equals sum parentheses B2 colon E4. Enter. And that seems like a number that hits just about right. So that's a bunch of different ways you can go about creating a function. And I focused on the sum function because I think it's nice and easy to see and double check for correctness. A few closing notes on saving. When you're ready to save, you can go ahead and click on the little picture of the disk here, or you can see the shortcut, which is Control S, which is kind of universal. You can also go to File, Save, or Save As. And that'll bring you to this familiar looking window. Go ahead and give your file a name. Choose a different folder if you like from the list up here. You'll notice the Save As type is ODF spreadsheet. ODF stands for Open Document Foundation, and I believe that originated with OpenOffice, and that will give you a file extension of .ods. That is Calc's default, but as I said at the beginning, Excel will open that as well. If you click on the drop-down menu, you can see we have a whole bunch of different options to save as. Of particular note are the Excel 97 to 2003. That is the older version of Excel. I'm not sure why you'd want to use that, but if you do, it will give you an extension of .xls. You also have the newer version here, 2000 to 365, which will give you the .xlsx extension, which is probably what you want if you're going to go that route. So I'll go ahead and select the newer Excel file type, click Save, and as is the case for a couple of those options, you're going to get this warning that says some things might not translate. You can choose to about face, or I'm just going to ignore the warning, use the Excel format, and as you notice at the top here, we now have a .xlsx document, and you can go ahead and edit that like you would normally. So one other thing you might want to take note of is the ability to export as a PDF. To do that, you just go to File, Export as PDF, have a look over the options if you like, click Export, name the file, click Save, and now you'll notice on the desktop we have a PDF of our spreadsheet. So that's all I have for today. Hopefully I turned you on to the idea of using Calc in the LibreOffice suite. I thank you for your time and hope you have a good day.